Generally, I like to keep my commentary political. That's what I do. I like to dissect the intricacies of our corrupt political and economic system because I feel like this is the thing that most affects the lives of the people in this and every other community in the country and in the world, really. But sometimes there are stories that happen right here in our communities, right here in Northwest Indiana, that symbolize a bigger rot in our society, in our culture, that need to be addressed directly as such. Which brings us to a story that happened in the town of Lake Station, right here in Lake County, Indiana, on the Indiana side. On Friday, last Friday, February the 21st, at approximately 2:44 p.m., officers at the Lake Station Police Department were dispatched to the 6700 block of 9th Avenue in the Mansards Park in reference to a welfare check, according to Lake Station Police. Upon arrival, a search warrant was obtained for the residents in question, at which point five deceased individuals were located. The preliminary investigation has led investigators to believe that this is an isolated incident with no threat to the public. This is what appears to be a murder-suicide. The Lake County coroner has identified the deceased from Lake Station this afternoon. The Lake County coroner has identified the deceased as Brianna Payne, who was 27 years old, Alana Payne, who was 4 years old, Ava Payne, who was 6 years old, and Aurora Payne, who was 7 years old. The Lake County coroner has ruled their deaths homicides by means of gunshot wounds. So you have a mother and her 3 daughters murdered by gunshot wounds. The fifth subject is Robert Payne, the father, the husband, who also suffered a gunshot wound, and his manner of death is pending. Good God, man. Such a horrific story. I saw her mother on the news the other day. I want you guys to hear this woman's mother because it's important to understand the amount of pain that happens when you don't get help. When you don't get help for whatever issues, whatever demons you have, this is what you leave behind.
So unreal.
Holding her newest grandbaby born to a separate mother, Brianna Payne.
Oh, the babies were such joys. They were little tornadoes, absolute tornadoes. They would just level a place when they went through. You knew they had been there.
Aurora Payne, Ava Payne, and Elena Payne, along with their mother, Bree, the victims of a murder-suicide in Lake Station. Owen says her daughter was always with her daughter's secretary.
Help anybody, anytime, anywhere, whatever they needed. She was Johnny on the spot right there for them.
The family was discovered shot to death Friday afternoon, according to the Lake County Coroner's Office. Catherine Presley employed Bree at her child care facility Ways in 2022, she says, because of Bree's relationship with her husband.
Family members with mental illness, please get help. Please get help. Don't do this to anybody else.
Owen says if sharing their story saves even one family, it'll help give her daughter's life and her granddaughter's lives meaning.
Watch breaking news on YouTube. Subscribe.
Yeah, so that's the grandmother from the Lake Station murder suicide case, which is really, really a heartbreaking case. And that's not even really the only case that we've seen recently. In that case in Chicago, a man killed a woman and stabbed her 2 sons. Marcus Bosley is facing a felony charge of resisting arrest here in Indiana, as well as charges of attempted murder, aggravated battery, and kidnapping. Relatives identified Marcus Bosley as the victim's ex-boyfriend. So in this case, it was an ex, a psychotic ex. Tion Jones, who's only 33 years old, was stabbed multiple times in her residence on the 7100 block of South Eberhart on the city's south side. Last Thursday, she was taken to a hospital where she was pronounced dead. This chain of events tragic, started in Chicago and ended up here in Indiana. In addition to the woman, 2 children who family members identified as her 2 sons, 8-year-old and 11-year-old, were hospitalized in critical condition following their stabbings. Before being stabbed, the 8-year-old was subject of an Amber Alert early Friday morning and was found at a gas station on the 8200 block of South Damon. Hours later, Bosley made his way across the border to Indiana, where a license plate reader alerted police to his whereabouts. A police chase ensued, and eventually the state police got him. Now, at last check, both boys are still recovering in the hospital, but I think this is important. These types of stories are important. They're as important as the issues talking about Trump and the Democrats and the Republicans and all these other issues, because what we are seeing is an overall melting down in our society. I talk about this quite a bit on this show because it's important to document this. For 4 years in a row, we had the most drug overdose deaths ever up until last year. Last year was the first year I believe it went down. But still, 4 years in a row, we had the highest overdose deaths in American history. We are seeing suicide rates have gone up over the years. We've seen drug overdose deaths go up over the years. We're seeing mental health crises go up all over. This is across racial lines, gender lines, religious lines. We are seeing an overall disconnect that is emerging within our society. And it used to be, especially in our community, we would say, well, black people don't do like spectacular crimes. Like a black crime is, you got a car, I want your car, I'll shoot you and steal your car. Or I'm a drug dealer, you owe me some money, I'll shoot you because you owe me some money. Or you in a gang, I'm in a gang, I'll shoot you because we're gang bangers. That's most of the crimes that you see. Not that that's good, not that that's tolerable, but it is on some level understandable in the sense that they have a rhyme and a reason. What we are seeing now is people spiraling out. We are seeing, people spiraling out and having huge mental health crises. And this is not just something you can say, oh, that's white people stuff anymore. Oh, man, that's white people. Black people don't do this. We used to always hear that. Black people don't do this. Only white people do this. Only white people. Mental health stuff is for black people. Well, not anymore. A study just showed that there's a huge shift in deaths of despair. There was a lot of ink that was spilled when we saw historic numbers of white people dying of drug overdoses, opiate deaths, and in the last decade, as rural America and much of the suburban landscape was affected by the type of economic depression and anxieties that have been going on in inner cities for decades. And a lot of black people were like, well, hey, this is what we've been going through for decades. This is what we've been going through forever. So a lot of black people didn't have a lot of sympathy for white people who are dying deaths of despair. But as things tend to do, they have started to reverse on us. New findings published by the journal JAMA Psychiatry found that there is a significant shift in the deaths of despair amongst middle-aged adults. The study tracked rates of mortality from suicide, alcoholic liver disease, and drug overdose deaths from 1999 to 2022 amongst people between 45 and 54 years old. Researchers found that in 2013, the rate of deaths amongst whites was approximately double that of black people, at 72 per 100,000 in comparison to 36 per 100,000 people for black people. So about a decade and some change ago, white people were twice as likely to die a death of despair than us. But by 2022, the rates of deaths of despair amongst middle-aged black people had nearly tripled to 103 per 100,000 people. So in 2013, the black community had, in 2013, the black community had 36 deaths of despair per 100,000 people. But by 2022, that number was 103, topping that of whites at 102. So whites went up too, but not as much as we did. The study also points to increasing drug overdose deaths amongst black people as fueling the surge. Also shows that Native Americans have a higher death rates of deaths of despair than any other racial or ethnic group across all years covered by the study. That is something that we as a society have ignored for many years. A lot of people don't know that Native American men are the people most likely to be murdered by the police. We have seen the ravaging effects of generations of colonialism on Native indigenous people as well. You know, people talk about capitalism, but these are deaths that I chalk up to capitalism as well. Deaths of despair. When there's an economic system that is designed to mass incarcerate you, to exploit you, that discards you, that renders whole segments of the population as not being economically viable. They don't have an economic plan for black men in urban America. They don't have an economic plan for Native American men on reservations. And so they just give you some drugs or they give you some alcohol and let you self-destruct. This is just what it is. By 2022, the midlife death rate from these causes amongst Native American and Alaskan Native people was 241 per 100,000 people. Wow, good God. That's over twice as many as blacks and whites, with the group's rate of death from alcoholic liver disease being 6 times higher than the rate for whites at 108 per 100,000 people. Rising, this is what one of this is what the study said. It said rising inequalities in deaths of despair among American, Indian, or Alaska Natives and Black Americans were largely attributable to the disproportionate early mortality from drug and alcohol-related causes, which increased leading up to and during the COVID-19 pandemic. Study co-author Joseph Friedman of the UCLA David Geffen School of Medicine also says higher death rates amongst minority groups highlight disparities in socioeconomic conditions, as well as a lack to access of supportive resources like mental health and addiction treatment. Here we go again, mental health and addiction treatment. These things are all products of the same beast. Disparities in socioeconomic conditions, lack of access to mental health and addiction treatment. Wow. After tripling between 2013 and 2022, the rates of deaths of despair, deaths from suicide, alcoholic liver disease, and drug overdose amongst Black Americans overtook the rate of white Americans. The deaths of these deaths amongst Native Americans has also been higher than that rate while among white Americans for all years of data. And it's important to understand that when you're talking about mental health issues. These are things that often go untreated, undiagnosed in our community. There, so many kids I went to school with, at Miller Elementary, at Marquette Elementary, here in Gary, at Emerson. So many kids I remember going to school with. We would just say, such and such is just crazy. Such and such is just crazy. Oh, so-and-so is just crazy. But now, as an adult, I look back at a lot of the people I went to school with over the years, and I say, what was going on at home? I'll tell you quickly about one of the kids I went to school with when I was in elementary school. I went to school with this guy. I'm not going to say who he is, but he had a little brother that went to our school as well. And everybody used to make fun of his little brother for being a crack baby. And he was, I think he might have been a preemie. He's considerably lighter and much more frail than his older brother, who was much bigger. And they used to make fun of him for being a crack baby. And he was very jittery, very energetic. And they'd say, such and such is a crack baby. And I remember at one point, the older brother who was, in my grade, I think I was in the 5th grade, 4th or 5th grade. He's telling a story, making fun of his younger brother about how one of their uncles had taken his little brother that they called the crack baby in a room, and the kid runs out. Ooh, he poked me in the booty. Uncle such and such poked me in the booty. Now, at the time, we all laughing because we're 4th and 5th graders like, oh, this is crazy, man. You crazy making fun of your little brother like that. Now, looking back at it, I'm like, oh my God, that kid was molested by his uncle. And if this kid did not have some sort of immediate intervention in his life, by the time he gets to middle school, high school, who knows what type of things that this kid would be out in the streets of Gary doing. That's how I see it now. I don't know what happened to him. Because, once I graduated, I ended up going to Emerson, which was a magnet school, considerably far away from my neighborhood. But I think about that kid a lot. I think about a lot of the kids I grew up with who came from families of addiction, who came from families of abuse. I knew people who were stealing cars in the 5th grade. Like, seriously, I knew people who were stealing cars in the 5th grade. And it just seemed normal to us at the time. It seemed completely normal. We have people walking around the city of Gary, Indiana, who have seen countless amounts of death and destruction. Who are just walking around shell-shocked. Just as much as any veteran from a war or a cop or a fireman or somebody, a lot of these people walking around outside this radio station, I see people walking around this radio station regularly in a daze. And I just have to ask myself, what have these people been through? And more importantly, what can be done for these people? What can be done for them? Because do we let it wait until they go off and shoot up a school or kill their family, kill their wife, kill their children? How do we intervene in this before it gets to that point? Now, obviously, the brothers who are committing these levels of domestic violence, it couldn't have just started right there. Obviously, those brothers had mamas. They have sisters. They have cousins. They might have daddies. I'm guessing most of them don't have fathers in their life if they're going through that. But if they do have fathers, they have brothers, they have sisters, they have cousins, they have aunties, they have uncles who know that they are beating the crap out of their wife or beating their kids. How do you let it get to this point before you intervene and say something and do something before they do something crazy like kill three of their children and their wife? How do you let it get to that point? How do you let it go that far? When do you step in? When do we as a society step in? How do we step in as a society? These are the type of questions we have to be asking ourselves, because we have a full-fledged crisis with domestic violence, with suicide, with drug overdose. What is going on? And how do we intervene in the lives of the people in our communities who are suffering? Maybe the caller has an answer. Hello, caller. What's up?
Hey, good evening, good man. How you doing?
It's all good, brother.
It's a sad situation, the way that dog did that little baby. Because the little baby came back out the room, said what he did, what that dog did to him. But listen, in Vietnam, they would cut off people's privacy and cut off their testicles and stick them down their throat.
Oh.
Did nobody kill that guy? Did nobody kill that guy? You ain't got to call no name. That raped that little baby like that in the house. Did nobody kill him? I'm asking a question.
Nobody did nothing. Nobody did nothing as far as I know. If the older brother that I went to school with just made fun of his little brother for being molested. That's all he did. He didn't call the police. He didn't do nothing. And I didn't have the thought of mine as a fourth grader to even think that it was that crazy at the time.
I'm wondering. I think how did they let him live? How did he live like that?
I don't know.
They see what he did to the baby, so how did he live past that?
I don't know.
What the hell was wrong with the people?
I don't
They
know.
let somebody dead to a baby and nobody had a funeral.
Nope. Not as far as I know.
Them some damn low down bastards, man. Bye,
Right.
man.
All right, thanks for calling. It's all good. I agree. So many things that, unfortunately, we started to see as normal or even like tolerable, like violent crimes and stuff like that. We are seeing now that the people who are that there is a bigger trauma that comes from that. You know, I talk about this regularly. I grew up here in Gary during the 90s when we were the murder capital of America. Oh, murder capital of America. To this day, I think about some of the memories I had growing up. You know, one of the first things I remember when we moved here to Gary, me and my mom are on a bus and on Lake Street, and we see a woman butt naked running down the streets of Lake Street, covered in blood, screaming, "He's going to kill me. He's going to kill me. He's going to kill me." This woman's crying, "He's going to kill me." I'm like 8 years old at this point. What happened to this lady? And what happened to everybody who had to witness that? You know, I've seen people dead bodies before after being shot. I've been right there, right after the drive-by happened. Driven by it, seeing bodies hanging out of the car. What does that do to us as a city? What does that do to us as a community? What about the people who are actually there while the drive-by was happening? What about the kids that saw the woman actually being abused by her husband or boyfriend? Are these people growing up? Are we doing enough to make sure that when they do grow up, that they are getting the help that they need to deal with the amount of trauma that they are witnessing? Because witnessing violent crime on a scale that has been possible in places like Chicago, even here in Gary, East Chicago, Detroit, Flint, Michigan, you know, the Bronx, Brooklyn, Compton, South Central Los Angeles, the scale of violence, it becomes like a virus. These babies grow up with violence normalized, and then they commit more violence out in the community. This is why we have to have a large scale. We have to have a large scale discussion about mental health in our society, about how we're going to deal with the level of trauma that we are dealing with as a community, as a society, as a whole. Man, rest in peace to those babies, to that mom. I don't know what the father was going through in that situation, but it's hard for me to just say, oh man, he was the worst person in the world. I don't know what that man's been through in his life, but I do know he should have been helped. Somebody should have helped that man before he got to a point where he would kill his own children and he'd kill his wife. All right, folks, let's lighten the mood when we come back. Happy Abbies! We'll be right back after these.